Is it weird that you're hearing my voice twice on this episode? As a reminder, I'm doing a voiceover of an episode that happened a few weeks ago because I screwed up the audio, recorded it incorrectly. So I'm re-recording the audio, and you will occasionally hear me as I recorded it on the day of, and you're hearing me as I'm re-recording it weeks later. I hope it's not confusing.
We're rolling. We're rolling.
This is a real thing. Real thing.
None of you have the balls to stop this. Stop this.
I've got plenty of time. I have nothing else going on today.
We're in the Wedge neighborhood right now.
Okay. How do I sound?
You
sound loud.
Say more.
Sound good?
Yeah, you sound fine.
Okay. I could fix it, probably. Should I try to fix it?
No, you sound fine to me right now. But
okay, I'm gonna leave it where it is. Okay, everyone, this is a very disappointing episode of the Wedge Life podcast. I totally messed up my audio, didn't use the right microphone, and it sounds terrible. So I'm your host, John Edwards. I'm re-recording the audio, and we're going to see if any of it makes sense. My co-host today is Jason Garcia. We recorded this episode like a week ago. I forget, 2 weeks ago. Our guest today is Jono Cowgill, not Cowgill, although I do make a joke coming up in the episode about fish and cow emoji. That's not how it's pronounced. It's pronounced Cowgill.
It's a better way to go.
Okay. Well, we're going to say it right.
People can remember it that way, but yeah, it is. I say Cowgill.
Out of respect, we'll pronounce it correctly on this episode.
Appreciate it.
This is where I talk about the rivalry on Twitter between Jono Cowgill and co-host Jason Garcia. Jason has been mean to Jono on Twitter. He wrote a series of tweets to make a story, a little fiction.
Yeah, I just appreciate the narrative fiction Twitter thread that Jason did last year, and hoping to see more in the future, and hoping also that it's published as a zine at some point.
Describing me as tall, handsome, and muscular. Jono was the villain.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'd hope I'd be described as kind of pathetic and groveling, and
you seized power because you were the head of the last remaining city government. Only the Parks Board remained.
And my first question is going to be, what is the Park Board? Tell us about the Park Board, what it is, why it's significant, and let's go to Jono's answer.
The Park Board is unique, and I think that's something that people don't realize often, that there aren't other elected boards that oversee specifically the parks in the United States. In fact, the only similar model that I'm aware of a city our size is in Vancouver in Canada. So there really aren't a lot of ancillary comparisons. When people say, well, the park board should do X, Y, or Z, it's like, that might be true within our specific world, but it's not something that can be comparable across cities because there's not something very similar. Other thing that people maybe don't know is that the legislature created us. And as such, there's a certain amount of authority that the legislature has over what the park board does, and certainly the park board benefits a lot from state dollars for all sorts of things. So those are two big things. And then finally, that we levy our own tax. So yes, the mayor proposes a budget. He proposes something for what the park board should get. But it's the Board of Estimate and Taxation, obviously, as you both know well with your work on understanding and learning about and interviewing BET prospective members, that really sets what the final levy is, and the board gets to recommend what it thinks the levy should be for itself.
I asked Jono if he has enjoyed being park board president. Obviously, he has not enjoyed that at all.
I've learned a lot. That's probably the best thing I can say about it. It has been a challenge, and I think that any position that's set up to have a certain amount of authority, but also not have the vestiges to support that authority is difficult. So what I mean by that is, like, I don't get paid a full-time salary to do this work. I have no staff. There's no policy staff. There are no aides. The board is really set up to kind of evaluate proposals and vote them up and down, and then to evaluate the budget. But it's become a very political organization. Maybe it has always been that. I've heard that there have been infighting for a long time, and in fact, there was a situation where folks almost came to fisticuffs maybe 20, 30 years ago at a board meeting. So, the infighting or the kind of struggles with the board back and forth on different sides has always been a thing. And that's an ongoing challenge.
Right here, I make a joke about fisticuffs, saying that feels like a meeting I watched this year.
I'm referencing a time when Commissioner Dietzig was on the board, but long ago at this point.
Right here, I asked Jono if he has a policy agenda to run on as an individual commissioner. How much power does he have to enact that agenda? The balance of power with staff, with the superintendent. What is his power as an individual commissioner?
So as a commissioner, you need 5 votes to do anything. So certainly there is, just like in any political body, an ability to maybe use the bully pulpit to say that you think X, Y, or Z thing needs to happen. But the only authority the board has is to vote up and down a variety of considerations, of resolutions or ordinance changes. And the president, the only other real authority the president has is to set the agenda for a meeting. So, I talk to the superintendent all the time. I might say, hey, superintendent, I really think that, at this park, you should move the picnic tables. Well, I can't just tell him to. I mean, he could do it or not. You could also say, well, Jono, you need 5 votes to direct me to move the picnic tables.
Right here, I make a joke comparing 14 bosses, that trope that's been used about the city council, to the park board, and I make it 9 bosses. We don't have a 9 bosses situation, Jono, do we?
We don't have a 9 bosses. We do not have an executive elected, so to speak, but we do 2 really important things as a board. We hire the superintendent, who is the operational head of the organization, and we set the budget every year. Those are the 2 most important things the board does. Yeah, that provide guidance about how you should operationally do the work. Unfortunately, what happens with every elected person is that they get constituent demands and requests all the time, and there's a calculus, and commissioners do things in different ways where they might want to really lobby a staff member to get something done efficiently for them. I don't think that's going to change no matter what the charter necessarily says. I mean, people have relationships with folks in the city and the park board.
Jason, can
It's been frustrating to me. Oh, go ahead.
No, go. I want to hear your frustrations. Tell us your frustrations.
Well, it's been frustrating to me to see a bit of kind of there are people that really care about the park system, and that's fantastic. There are people that have been involved in the park governance and in the park system for a very long time. And this is no different probably at the city level as well. but they're still able kind of to wield influence. They know the right emails to email, and that can be frustrating when you're trying to create a system where everybody has equal access and influence to, build a better park system. Seeing that there are mechanisms and levers for folks who just kind of know how to connect with the right people to get things done is an ongoing frustration and surprise that I found when I got on the board.
Okay, I asked Jason if I can tell a story. I don't really need to ask Jason's permission because this is my podcast.
Absolutely, you can.
I tell the story about being heckled at open streets by a member of the park board and ask Jono to guess which of his colleagues was the heckler.
Oh man, I'm nervous about even suggesting who I think it was, but you were at Open Streets West Broadway, so I'm just thinking about who would be up there. Yeah.
I tell him it was West Broadway.
Well, I mean,
in Ward 5.
I would say perhaps it was Severson, but he doesn't seem like a heckler. And then you have Vice President Vita, who does live up there and is running for city council.
It was Latricia Vita. She was the one who heckled me.
I see.
She said, "There's the mean person." She shouted it as I was walking past. I looked and I waved. Kept going. Didn't engage. She called out,
"Yeah,
we used to be friends." Not really true. We didn't used to be friends at all. We were nice to each other, but we weren't friends.
Wow. She always got so much joy every time you made fun of my hair. And back when probably could still make fun of my hair that I'm losing, but really could have made fun of my hair back when I had kind of crazy hair, and she got a lot of joy out of those posts.
I told Jono if anyone should be heckling me about how mean I've been, it should be Jono. I've been merciless about his hair.
Yeah, we've set aside some time here, Jono, if you would like to heckle John.
I feel bad about it.
Yeah. Go ahead. Tell me how mean I am.
I don't have the skill for that. No, I'm just glad that folks are paying attention to what the hell is going on locally on a daily basis.
Tell him you can tell he cuts his own hair.
It's true. I do cut my own hair. It's not great.
Honestly, pretty surprised. I'm surprised you're not going to Kenwood Barbers just there by the ice cream shop.
It occurs to me that this is probably a really bad episode, but we're going to keep going.
They don't let him on that side of Hennepin.
Yeah, right.
Okay, right here, I ask, why is the park board so terrible? A lot of assholes on the park board.
Yeah.
I don't like anyone on the park board.
Yeah.
Maybe Jono, maybe Chris Meyer. It's the kind of place flies under the radar, like the BET, tends to attract people who've got a lot of time on their hands, like to fight. It's not a full-time job, doesn't pay well.
No.
Need to be either really angry at other human beings or be an angel who wants to do good in the world. What's going on with Brad Bourne? I've seen Jono get irritated with Brad Bourne over and over.
Visible? No.
It's extremely visible. You hate this man. He hates you too.
Yeah.
You can be honest.
I try to be magnanimous. It's been a frustration. With me and Brad. What would I say? I mean, the park board is the intersection of real estate interests, conservation interests, and educational interests. The interests of how we keep our kids safe and keep them active. And that can lead to a lot of friction because there are very different ideas about and philosophies about what should happen with those things. I think the park board was set up to be kind of the city fathers organization to protect land that was deeded by wealthy people to the city, and to give them some confidence that, their generosity was a really great thing that was going to be protected by the right people. And I think what we found, especially with the board that was most recently elected, is that now you got a much more diverse board, and it's not people that come from land, that a lot of people that aren't necessarily, they're renters maybe. I was a renter when I got on the board. I now own a small, tiny condo, so I'm still not really a landowner. And I guess what I'm saying about that is that, there are just these folks that the board's set up to be a place for folks that don't need to have another job, and they're also given this substantial opportunity to oversee 15% of Minneapolis land. So that's a lot of land. And as my Republican grandfather developer has often said to me, they don't make more land. So developers always want to get their hand on whatever land already exists and have an influence on that land. And I think that's what brings a lot of the friction into the city. So are you going to be making sure the land is for the people, or are you making sure that the land is benefiting, the folks that can make money off of it?
I think what you were just talking about really dovetails with one of the things that I wanted to ask about, because one of the things that I see as being a problem with an elected park board, not that I don't think we should have an elected park board, but one of the areas where the flaws can be taken advantage of are when you look at, again, the people who have the money and time to go to park board meetings, to incessantly lobby their park board members, and having at-large members, is that, to your point, it really does shift the focus from, how can parks be used by people who maybe don't have their own backyard, maybe don't have a place to meet their entire family and barbecue for someone's birthday or something like that, versus what bothers the people who happen to live around the parks. And I think we saw that writ large last summer, with the unhoused crisis reaching a terrible point where people, had no options but to live in the parks. So when you look at that, can you talk about what sorts of pressures you feel from people who live around the parks and how they, want to have a broader voice? Because that's something I hear in Minneapolis a lot, is well, you have to listen to the people who live close to the parks.
Right.
Which, when you look at how unevenly distributed around the city the parkland is, I'm not sure that that's really a realistic stance to have.
Right. Well, okay. There's a lot in there. So I guess, and that's really, really good question. So on the park board being elected, it probably would be it would definitely be less publicly, politically messy if there was not an elected body that oversaw the parks. I don't think it would be a better system. I don't think we would have the top system that we have, because we protect so much money that would otherwise be taken away for other uses by the city if it was just a city department. I think we have a benefit for just how robust our park system is relative to park systems around the country. That's just an aside. I believe in the park system. I believe in having a board as a president, but just generally speaking, I've come to believe that. On the larger question about influence and who you listen to, I think you're totally right. I mean, when you have 3 at-large commissioners, 6 district commissioners, the at-large is generally known to be a position that's maybe easier in that you're not getting district requests from a specific area. You can kind of give those requests to the district commissioners you're really able to kind of sit back and from your vantage point kind of survey this, whatever the situations are that you're considering, and make a decision. But that's not often how it goes, because it costs a lot of money to run a successful citywide race. I think we found that in the city council races in 2017, right? Like, there was a lot of progressive movement, and good progressive candidates won in a lot of places that were on the ground and maybe not as well funded. But at-large candidates in the park board, the DFL endorsed at-large candidates didn't win except for Commissioner French. And folks that were able to raise a substantial amount of money did win in that race, and similarly with the mayor, I think. So so that's kind of just a reality of those positions, and then that shifts probably who you're listening to prima facie. On the issue of the encampments and who you're listening to there, I mean, that was unlike anything I certainly have ever experienced, unlike anything other commissioners say that they've ever experienced. I mean, we were getting like thousands of emails a day, and it wasn't even necessarily from people. I mean, it was hard to start sifting through where they were coming from. It would, yes, we go, you listen to neighbors, you go talk to people in the parks, people start talking about where they're coming from. You're getting emails. Some people are emailing you from other places with their moral point of view because they are focused on Minneapolis right now. It's people from, I used to live in Minneapolis. I live in fucking, I don't know, Durham, North Carolina. And I can't believe
Did Jono just say fucking on the Wedge Live podcast?
I'm so sorry.
Okay. Continue.
I'm getting fired up.
No. Now
shoot.
I want to say it.
It's
Fucking.
the end.
I said it too.
Well, you didn't send me any guidelines there. Is this like primetime NBC? I'm so sorry, John. So all I'm trying to say is that we were getting a substantial number of every commissioner was getting so more messages than you could ever really synthesize to understand. And yes, we were getting angry neighbors, many of whom lived in certain area of the city that were frustrated. The other thing we were getting is not a lot of comprehensive collaboration or support from other levels of government, more ready or experienced to help support these encampments. We had many frustrating conversations. Commissioner French would tell you the same thing with governor's office about what kinds of supports we would get. You might remember that when folks moved from Powderhorn and it went back to the Wall of Forgotten Natives, and then suddenly that disappeared pretty quickly. We were told all summer there's no possibility for vouchers to get into hotels. That just doesn't work, that the system isn't set up to allow it to work out. Well, there are vouchers, but not for these folks that are in this park. When folks moved to the Wall of Forgotten Natives, they all got vouchers within, I think it was like a week or two. And then that site was shut down, and fenced off and everything. Maybe I'm moving around a little bit, but what I'm trying to say is, there's the influence of people that maybe are loud. There's the influence of what you want to do is doing the right thing for people, and then there's the influence of where power, money, and capital are, and what collaboration you're getting from other levels of government that are, frankly, a lot more influential than the park board is.
Yeah, I think that's definitely one point that I think is important to note, is that I think it's a tragedy that it fell to the park board to try to manage all of that, because there are, in terms of the county, in terms of the state, in terms of the city, there are a lot of other organizations that should have been in a better place to deal with this. I point to this as, another one of our mayor's failings over the past year, is that he completely failed to step up and help his constituents. In Minnesota, to register to vote, you don't have to have a a street address. You can say, I stay in this park. I stay
Right.
at this bridge on the Greenway, or things like that. So these are very much citizens of Minneapolis and the constituents of all levels of our government. And, I'm sure that it was a really difficult time to try to figure that out. I'm sure that nobody else in the park board has ever put together a manual for trying to deal with this. But if you were to put that manual together going forward, what are some of the things that you would tell, future President Cowgill or
Right.
other people coming onto the park board about how to deal with something like that?
That's really good. Well, first thing I'll say, in the late 40s, there was a permanent encampment system because a bunch of people who were in the Army came back from World War II, and they did not have housing and they did not yet have jobs. And the park board did support some encampments at that time. It's the only other time that I'm aware that that was the case. There wasn't a manual, I think, that was created. As far as I know, I didn't get any other information there. But moving forward, the manual, I think, is getting in line some collaboration to effectively support people. Now, that isn't something that is necessarily, well, it's not easy to do because folks that have really high needs, it's never going to look nice to, the people that want everybody to have a picket fence. When you're supporting folks that are really unwell or that are struggling with a lot of issues that have put them in a place where they're not able to support themselves, or where they need a variety of other supports to
people who are struggling with capitalism. You can say that.
Right. Sure. No, thank you. So I guess what I'd say in the future is a couple of things. One, I don't think that there's going to be a year like 2020, knock on wood, for a while, in that we're not going to have a confluence of circumstances like these unique ones where we have a pandemic, we have, and I hope maybe I'm wrong because we haven't really changed our policing system, but we had a pandemic, we had a governor's order associated with that pandemic, so we couldn't just tell people to leave, and we didn't have housing spaces for them. We had the murder of George Floyd just weeks before folks moved in the largest numbers to Powderhorn Park, in addition to many other encampments around the city. So we had that reckoning, and we have an ongoing housing crisis. I guess in some ways, all three of these things are kind of continuing, but the pandemic is a bit more under control. I could see in the future, though, we have a similar situation associated with climate change, where we have a substantial number of refugees coming to Minneapolis or Minnesota, who don't have anywhere to stay, and we do not have the housing infrastructure to fully support them, and we need a way to do it. The thing that I would say for that manual is, for it to be effective and to actually support those people in the long term, you need to line up a variety of levels of government coordination to make sure that people are on the same page. I'm happy that the park board stepped up in a small way last summer, but we did not have everybody lined up on the same page about how to support everybody, and it led to a real failing in supporting people who are already really vulnerable. And I'm very sad about that. And I think it's a pox on all of our systems continuing. Oh, it looks like my, you guys still hear me?
Yeah, you're still here.
Oh, great. So that's what I would say. I mean, you need to line up those supports, and I don't think that unhoused people are going away from our park system. There are still many people who are unhoused who use our parks every day. We do not see them as often as we did last summer, but that doesn't mean that they're not there and that they don't need a variety of supports. Also saying The real goal is to get people housed. And one of the other confounding factors around the housing crisis and the fact that we have a lot of unhoused people that we see in Minneapolis, it's like, well, why don't we see that in other communities? Well, other communities have effectively zoned out the possibility of seeing unhoused folks.
Right. They don't have services. They don't have housing.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Like, people come to Minneapolis is because this is where there's some support for people who don't have resources. The reason they're not going to be in here.
That's a reality. Yeah. It's true that we actually have some support systems, and people do seek that out. Even broader than Minnesota, like people coming from South Dakota, North Dakota.
Is it weird that you're hearing my voice twice on this episode? As a reminder, I'm doing a voiceover of an episode that happened a few weeks ago because I screwed up the audio, recorded it incorrectly. So I'm re-recording the audio, and you will occasionally hear me as I recorded it on the day of, and you're hearing me as I'm re-recording it weeks later. I hope it's not confusing. Okay, right here I talk about the stakes in the election. They're pretty high. Jono has an opponent whose response to homelessness, I guess, was to give a tour of trash in the woods that she attributes to homeless people. It's kind of a weird thing to do. It's not really, I don't know how that's a response to the problem. Advertising a trash tour on the nextdoor.com website. You're running against a Lowry Hill fancy pants. What are you going to deliver? What is your agenda? How does it differ from what is Jono going to deliver that's different from his opponent?
Great question. The stakes are pretty high. We have a race has a very clear separation. You have one person, myself, who's saying we need to work on perfecting our park system to make it so that everybody has a voice in determining what happens in our system, that we have equitable investments, not just in terms of like where we build new playgrounds, but in terms of who we're investing in. Are we giving jobs to young people? Are we investing in programs that directly serve in a wraparound way people of color in our most disinvested neighborhoods? I've been talking about that and fighting for that for my first term. I'll continue to do that. And we're close to getting a pretty substantial investment in those youth services here in our ask to the BET. On the other side, you have my opponent who has raised, first of all, more money than any other park board candidate, including the at-large candidates like Commissioner Forney, and whose major platform is essentially to privatize the parks. Her platform is a friends group for every park. Friends groups are important infrastructure for the system. They're people that help with gardening, but they're the idea that every park would have an influential friends group that got to determine what happens in that park is really problematic. And why do I think that's probably what's going to happen? Well, she has been the leader of the friends group at Thomas Lowry Park, which has a substantial influence over that park, and has raised hundreds of thousands of dollars to rehab a fountain that was not even broken in that park. So what I'm imagining is a erosion of the equity matrix that we use to determine where we're investing in new systems around our park system. And I'm really concerned about that. I'm also really concerned that we would have somebody who's made it very clear that the wealthiest people are the ones that she's going to court for her support. She's raised mostly max donations from folks from mainly one area of the city, and everybody deserves a voice. That's certainly true, but it's concerning if you're not trying to build a coalition of people from across your district to show that you were trying to serve everybody in your district.
I hadn't heard the thing about the friends group, but it makes sense. I know Elizabeth Schaefer mostly is the person behind the Save the Seven Pools effort, which...
Yep, Save the Seven Pools.
Diverted $200,000 out of a neighborhood org a pool of money that had previously been devoted to affordable housing. I think you need to know about 7 pools. It's basically the front yard to some of the most expensive homes in Lowry Hill.
No, it's nice, but it also means that Park Board, in our staff time, diverts time to helping support and project manage that project, as opposed to project managing other projects in other neighborhoods of the city. I did broach those concerns with this group when they were putting this together. They were very gung ho, and they had support, and so I said, you're going to raise a lot of this money. We'll work with you. But the reality is, when you have all sorts of groups advocating for that and saying, well, we've raised X number of thousands of dollars because the neighbors around this park have that kind of capital, you should drop everything to do this project. We're just going to revert back to a time before our substantial historic neighborhood park plan funding, and the discrepancies that we already still see across the system, just in terms of what a park looks like. Just, the prima facie sheen of a new park is going to get worse, and you'll see those discrepancies.
Okay, right here I make fun of Jono for saying prima facie. I can't even pronounce it, prima facie. He said it twice so far. It's not very accessible language. I don't even know what it means.
Okay.
I ask him not to say prima facie again.
Thanks.
I don't know what it means. I don't think anyone listening knows what it means. Don't say it again.
It's something I've noticed about the way the Park Board does engagement, is it's not the intention probably, but it naturally brings in, as Jason was saying earlier, the people who live near the parks and consider the park their backyard, because it oftentimes literally is their backyard. It's right behind their house. Mm-hmm. And they will fight against things like a basketball court replacing a tennis court, maybe, or putting in a basketball court at all.
Yeah.
Like a bike route so people can be safe biking on a parkway, or maybe adding a skate park where, we've got 5 baseball fields here that are always empty. Maybe we could put in a little skate park instead. Right. Things like that, I think, about who is served by the parks. Is it going to be the people who want them to be quiet and empty? Or, maybe people who can't afford to live next door to a park? How do you fix the engagement process so it serves people who can't show up to that CAC meeting for 3 hours and badger the volunteers who are serving on that community advisory committee? How do we? I know you're more likely to listen to the people who aren't protecting
that's
their
true,
backyards.
but
that's a stake here.
Yeah.
But how do we make this better?
How do we make it better? Well, there are a couple of ways. One, you can create an engagement process that actually pays people for their time, makes it worth their while, and you ensure that you're getting a broader representative cross-section of a community to serve on that community advisory committee. And I would say, it's not bad that people care about their parks. It's not bad that people get engaged and advocate for improvements in the parks. What's not a good sign is to see to see certain groups have maybe outside influence over what happens in that park, and especially to see the institution undercut community-led initiatives that are by young people, or especially young people of color. Like, an example of that was the skate park that was set up at Bede-Makaska this summer, in the spot where the building had burned down, the refectory. And because of some of our legal regulations, unfortunately, this thing that was community-led by youth was dismantled. We found a new site for it, but the summer is gone. That impetus, that community energy, was dismantled, and that's something that we need to advocate for, changing how our system works so that we can support those things. We should support community-led initiatives that come from folks that aren't usually the ones using the current contrived system to make change and activate a park space. And we are, unfortunately, I think, just as institutions built to go and testify at meetings, there is a very unfortunate power dynamic there. You know, the board is up a foot from the rest of the people. If you go to a meeting, it's not collaborative. It can be intimidating. So yeah, I think that there's a lot that can be done outside of our planning processes, even to just support community-led initiatives, where it doesn't have to take us to have this whole planning situation where we appoint a community advisory committee or anything like that. But we have staff that are recognizing and connecting with community members, recognizing how we can maybe undergird and invest the natural ideas of community members. Another example of that is like kids have been in some places like tagging park buildings. I think we should have all sorts of young people creating great art on all of our park buildings. And this last year, because of some of the COVID relief dollars, we've been able to fund some one-time murals that are by and for young people across the system. I hope we can do that, a lot more of that, where we're actually just putting money into things that we know are being created by the people that don't usually have an impact or voice in shaping what our parks look like. But I'm not directly answering your question, because there are still other systemic problems that allow for certain people who understand a system, and those are usually white, more wealthy people, to have an influence. I'm not sure, as long as we live in a system of capital peddling, that's going to entirely go away. But what I do think is refining and improving our community advisory committee process to actually fund people's time would go a long way in improving
A quick
what we have.
a quick and easy answer you could have given to that was elect me and not my opponent, because I will listen to the right people and not the wrong people.
Thank you for the comms
So,
advice. You're right.
yeah.
I have so much to say.
Awesome.
I'm just so excited
Yeah.
to be here. You know,
Yeah.
this is like my big moment this fall.
Yeah. How many times do you get to sit down for an hour on and give an interview on YouTube?
Not often.
Oh my god, this episode sucks so bad. I'm not sure I have the energy to keep doing the voiceover. I might just, give it up and let you listen to my voice on that terrible laptop microphone.
So one of my interactions with the park system that I like to talk about is many years ago, I lived at 26th and Harriet in Whittier, right across the street from Whittier Park. And I had a very small child at that time. And I would see how many people would come to that park on the weekends, or after school time, and sort of the makeup of that park. I don't know if you're familiar with that park specifically, but, it's a kind of a big, wide open space. There's a small playground area. There's a baseball diamond, but there isn't a lot of shade. There isn't a lot of real features that would draw you to it if it wasn't like the most convenient park to where you live. And then, as you head west from there, even along 26th Street, you get a little further west and you get to Mueller Park, which is a nicer park, has a little kid pool, some trees and shade. And then you go further west and you get to, Levin Park?
Oh, right. Yeah, the triangle thing.
Yeah, Smith Park. Mm-hmm.
And then, obviously you eventually run into the lake and you're very near to Kenwood Park.
Yeah.
And, you look at the how many people would go to Whittier Park because, they lived in the apartment buildings near there. They lived on Nicollet. They lived on Grand in apartment buildings. And then when you get over to near the lakes, people who already have giant yards have this massive park with all sorts of features and amenities. And how do you look at our system and say, there are clearly, things that we can do to help upgrade our parks for people who need them, while having people like an at-large commissioner from that area like Meg Forney, who is just going to be pushing for more investment in the places that are already what I would look at and say are already exceptional.
Yeah. So I grew up right by Whittier Park. My parents were renters in a duplex on 25th and Garfield, and when I was really little, that's where I went. And it always was a dynamic space. It was also always a bit shabbier than other parks. And so one thing I'd mention here, it's not necessarily about like investment, like just number of dollars for a new thing. It's about the staff that show up to invest in the day-to-day maintenance of that space. So that's something that we need to improve. Park Board's done a little bit of work, but there's a lot more that needs to be done just to say, hey, there's some parks that get a lot higher usage from a lot of people, and those are the parks that need not just same number of staff as other parks, but more staff to be there to help keep it up and improve it when it's getting just basically loved to death. So that's one thing I'd say. It's not just about like, oh, we have the new amenity here. I mean, Whittier is a super dynamic place. It has all the programs that are associated with the community school as well as the rec center. But just having more caring adults there that love and respect that space and have relationships with those families is going to go a long way. And that's something where that we need real equity, which means there need to be more of those people and more budget there than at Kenwood Park. So that's one thing I'd say. What comes to my mind also is just that, we have these dollars invested to do a bunch of things at Whittier Park here in the near term. I'm excited about those things. But from the commissioner perspective, we have some good guidance right now to actually get those things done. And if we keep having advocates that are elected to that board who actually prioritize those neighborhood parks and not the parks that have already had all of this investment, not just from the city, but investment in time and energy and resources from people who have that time, energy, and resource who just live by there. I mean, the people that just have more time who live in those areas, which is great. That should mean that then the park board has a little bit more of an ability to direct resources to the areas where there are people that don't have those time, that amount of time, energy, and resource to keep up those spaces. So we can do more there, and that's only going to happen if you elect me as somebody who lives in Stevens Square, doesn't live on Mount Curve, grew up in Whittier, actually, has experienced the benefit of those parks growing up, and recognizes that those investments are a priority beyond where we place trees being planted in Kenwood Park.
There you go, Jono. You're mastering this. Vote for me, not my fancy pants opponent.
Yeah, good answer.
Okay, right here I talk about the thing that bugs me about Whittier Park. It's just a big, wide, open space with nothing in it. No people, just a big old baseball field. Nobody's ever playing baseball there. My big idea, fill it in with some trees. Mueller Park's full of people hanging out, sitting under a tree, barbecuing. I'm not a landscape designer. What does Whittier Park look like going forward?
I'd have to look at the master plan. There are new plans. There was an attempt to put in what's called like an artificial turf, like premier quote unquote field there. The reason being those fields just are better quality for people who are playing soccer and futsal and other sports like that, which are way more popular now than baseball is or kickball. That did not pass. There was a lot of concern about the environmental impact. And I think, unfortunately, some misunderstanding about the potential environmental impact of artificial turf. It might be not like zero, but it actually might be actually better because you don't have to keep reseeding monoculture grass if you have this artificial turf. But I hear you. I'd have to look at what the exact plan is. I know there are plans for community gardens along there, and I guess the other thing I'd say is I'd love to see the school have a larger role in kind of guiding the plans for that area. They do use it a lot. I actually think that some of the school folks have been helping with watering some of the new trees that have been planted around that field. So we could get them more involved and build on that energy that they have to keep the new trees that we have planted alive. That would be my goal.
Do you remember the conversation about DuPont Avenue and the bike lane and the trees? And people were talking about this bike lane is going to take out some insane number of trees.
Right.
Like, there's no way that's going to take out all those trees. I think maybe park staff had determined that there were some trees that were like questionable that they would have to look at. Maybe they would go, maybe they wouldn't.
Yeah,
do you
like
remember
2
that?
or 3. Yeah.
It was going to be 2 or 3 trees.
I think it was 2 or 3 that would have had to, for sure, have been removed. But I think the number that people were putting signs out was like they were going to destroy 50 trees or 60. I don't know.
Yeah, there was so many trees. Like you could have told me that, and I'd be like, "Wow, that's a lot of trees. Maybe we shouldn't do that." Because there's no bigger supporter of trees than me. And when we have these conversations where people make up lies about how many trees are going to be destroyed by a bike lane, and bike lanes and trees, they simply can't coexist.
So many trees. If you'd told me that many trees, I would have said, screw the bike lane. Let's save the trees. People need to stop lying about trees.
Like, we don't have this conversation about parking spaces. Like, if we removed these parking spaces, we could put in so many more trees. We don't ever have that conversation. Given over so much space to cars, and we just take it for granted that that space should always be devoted to cars, whether anyone uses it or not, whether there's traffic or parking demand on that parkway or not. I know you've been on the right side of these issues, and this is another case where sending Jono back is hugely important because I get the sense that his opponent's going to go the other way.
Yeah, that could be the case. I would say there was not a lot of support from some folks in my maybe more Western constituency for closing of the parkways, but in how we did it, the process. But once it happened, it was widely popular across a lot of different groups of folks in my district, and I know we did it, for the purposes of having people spread out during COVID. But it's just one example of how just bold action to just do something that is a demonstrable improvement for the general public can be a successful way of showing people that there is a different future possible. We have all sorts of plans for reducing parking space in our different parking lots. That's one way to propose a change, but we've found recently that it's backfired with our planning processes. I think the DuPont example is a good one that you brought up. I'd kind of forgotten about how frustrating that one was because it just got derailed by how we put it out there, not being able to fully answer questions correctly or quickly, being unclear about how many trees were going to be removed, and then suddenly a really good plan gets completely scuttled.
Oh, I'm just incredibly tired. I already spent 90 minutes with Jono. Now I got to spend another 90 minutes with Jono. On top of editing this together, what is that? It's like 4.5 hours of Jono. Okay, here I'm teasing Jono about using the word riparian on his website. I don't think this joke lands. Maybe it'll land better as I narrate it. I think it means like banks of a river. Why would you use that word? No one's going to know what that means.
I've been saying riparian, but maybe I'm wrong. I really don't know. Occasionally I go to neighborhood meetings and I get quizzed about the names of plants, um, and some question about what do I know about our natural environment. So I occasionally like to be specific about what I'm talking about with the terms that are used by the people that actually plan these things, so that people can see that I'm taking this seriously and I do understand the tenets of the issue. And a riparian surface is the areas of kind of natural planting around water bodies, and it's helpful to make the water a lot cleaner and enhance habitat as well.
Are you trying to prove how smart you are by using?
Yeah, is there a calendar in your house somewhere that has words like riparian and prima facie and things like that on it?
Word of the day.
I grew up with educators in my family, and I sometimes just the words they come out that way. I don't know. I need to unlearn something.
Okay, here I'm asking Jono about a section on his website about opportunities for Black-owned businesses in the parks.
There are certainly ways to do that. Well, one, we could permit and waive the permitting fees for people to sell wares in parks. An example that comes to mind recently, and this is it's just the example that comes to mind. Pride this year, I bike up to Pride, and there are folks that just out the back of their car are selling, slushies, effectively like Italian ices.
Okay, here I make a joke about trunk slushies. The technical term is trunk slushies.
Trunk slushies may or may not have had some additional, imbibing liquid in them, but fantastic, and they should be supported by our park system. Yes, we should have more like coffee carts. We should have more stands, especially downtown, that food trucks, etc. We do support some of those. I'm really proud of the sous chef investment, but that was a substantial investment to get the Owamni restaurant down there. That's fantastic, and I'm glad we did that investment. We just can't replicate that over and over again, efficiently. But what we can do more efficiently is set people up to be able to go out and sell at the busiest park sites, and maybe come up with a better plan for how to make it worth their while. So, there are currently permitting fees, and, with our restaurants, there's a percentage that comes back to the park board, for infrastructure, et cetera. It's a revenue generating machine. But the park board could be a real incubator space for some of that, especially at our busiest sites.
Jason?
As a person of Latinx descent, I would strongly encourage this line of thinking that you're on. Like if you go to a lot of cities, in Southern California, you find many people with tamale carts or things like that, and those are very easy businesses for people with not a lot of capital to start, and especially if you can follow that up with a city program to allow them to be able to sell without having to pay heavy permitting fees and things like that. Having obviously food trucks have expanded massively in Minneapolis, and that's also an area that I think a lot of Black-owned and Asian-owned and Latinx-owned people sort of can get boxed out of. They're not always the first choices of people who are running breweries and things like that. So, I think if the park board can help with that sort of thing, that would be amazing.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think that's right on. And, we've made some strides, but we still have a lot of opportunity with big events. For example, Holodazzle is a really big event in Loring Park. It didn't happen last year. I do hope it comes back. There's a beer garden, and it's a lucrative thing to have that beer garden. Now there aren't a lot of indigenous or black owned liquor making establishments or beer making establishments in Minneapolis, but there are a few, and the park board can do a better job of prioritizing those folks to get those spots and build upon that. I think you're right on, and we're way behind in the Midwest, generally speaking. Looking at the informal economies out on, especially in LA and San Francisco. I used to live in San Francisco. I mean, there are people. You just walk down Valencia Street. There's people selling things out of the back of their cars or just like out of a suitcase all the time, and it happens to be like the most delicious food on the street. So there's just a lot more that we could do here to support that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's talk about the park police. So the park board has there's a park police department. How many officers does the park police have?
I believe we have budgeted 34 officers. I believe that right now there may be only 30 active officers.
Have officers quit? Like MPD has had officers quit?
I think that we have I shouldn't say too much because I don't know the details for sure. We have not experienced the same levels of attrition issues that the city has experienced.
And so should we defund the park police and invest in other forms of public park safety? Is there a parallel effort happening at the park board similar to creating this Department of Public Safety? I know when I talk about this with other people in terms of the Minneapolis Police Department, it often comes up, and it occurs to me that if we just eliminated the police department entirely, you'd have the Hennepin County sheriffs, for example, potentially coming into the city. And if there are bigger assholes in the world than Minneapolis police officers, it would be Hennepin County sheriff's deputies. And so wouldn't you prefer to have that work done by a Minneapolis police officer operating under the city's structure, theoretically, than bringing in those deputies? Similar points brought up by some of the candidates I've talked to for park board this year say, well, wouldn't we rather have a park police department handling this under our authority than to have Minneapolis police officers come in and do this work? So
as long as we have a 911 structure where people are sitting in a park and there's an issue that they have and they can call somebody and expect a response, I would want to have a staff person, if it's a peace officer, so be it, that is responsible in reporting to a staff member that's under the jurisdiction of the superintendent and therefore has to report to the park board, as opposed to somebody, especially right now under the current city system, that does not have to report to the park board at all. I mean, that is true. I think that more broadly, the park board is committed to moving beyond policing and ensuring that we have the right people responding to issues in the park system and getting ahead of issues by having caring adult role models in all of our parks that know the kids that are in the neighborhood, by ensuring that we have active parks that have eyes on the street and are generally safer spaces overall. And by expanding this new team that we have, the Community Connections and Violence Prevention Team, which really is kind of a similar model to what is being proposed in the city of Minneapolis, where you have really community workers. We have a street reach team. These are folks from our community, by our community, that know people in the neighborhoods, that build relationships, and can identify issues and get people who are struggling connected with the services they need and that do not carry a gun. So we're investing in those things, and I think we need to continue to invest more. I'm also, really of the opinion that, police are going to come into our parks sometimes, and that's something that we need to get away from. But as long as they are coming into our parks, I'd rather they be people that are supported or that are directed by our superintendent.
The times when I've seen park police in parks, it's typically been for someone who's in emotional distress, having a mental health issue. Those are the kinds of things I see. Is that something you think the park police should be responding to?
I think that overall that we should have mental health responders responding to people that are in mental and emotional distress. I think police should be there if we know that there is a gun on the premises, perhaps, that, and that does happen. We have had those issues. Our police have done good search and rescue for folks that are having suicidal ideation, and that's something that's not reported very often, but it's something that happens, and we've had good experiences with folks there. Does that mean that they have to be armed police? I don't think necessarily. I think that's a discussion that the board should have. I've tried to progress that discussion over the last 4 years, haven't gotten as far as I wish. But there are some cities that have park rangers, and I don't think it's the worst idea to have folks that are in our parks keeping people safe to also kind of know about parks. Know maybe a little bit about what natural spaces, maybe be able to do some educational programs in addition to keeping our parks safe. So I'm a proponent of looking at that. There's a model in LA. There's a model in Denver. We should investigate that, but I can't do it alone. I need to get people on board with a collective vision for what that would look like.
Okay, right here I'm asking about redesigning the park police uniform. Oof. I feel bad for anyone who has listened this deep into the episode. I'm sorry.
It did fizzle out. It was disappointing to me. There was a plan to redo the uniforms, change them to green. The park staff came back with a proposed uniform. It looked good in my estimation. They attached the staff attached a kind of a proposed price tag to that. At the time, people were really following the park board very closely, and there was a lot of agitation about investing anything in police. And as a result, we did not get the votes we needed to pass the investment, and so we still have blue.
Here I talk about not being able to tell the difference between Minneapolis police officer and a park police officer. Same uniform. Once they're out of the car, you can't tell the difference.
They're in the same union and they're trained by the same folks. One of the best things that under President Bourne's leadership that he did along those lines was get the park police to change their cars, so at least they didn't look exactly like MPD cars. When there's a park police officer, it's huge park police on the side, but there's more that needs to be done.
Here I toss it to Jason, who typically has a defund the police poster behind them. Let's see what Jason has to say.
I had an extended conversation last summer with our mayor about, watching unhoused people being forcibly removed from spaces where, they had all of their belongings, their shelter, basically all that they had to consider anything as a home. And, watching police come in with bobcats, tearing down tents, destroying property, things like that. And one of the things that he hid behind constantly is like, oh, no, those aren't MPD. Those are park police. That's the park police that are doing this. And, for being as pro-police as he was very quick to throw the park police under the bus for that. But when you, certainly I know that you're somewhat active on social media and things like that. When you see these videos and you see the ways that park police treat our most at-risk citizens, like what do you take from that, and how do you go back to the superintendent and your fellow commissioners, and like what does that conversation look like?
Yeah, it's anger and despair and frustration that keeps happening. So on that specific issue, when we saw early last summer the first attempts at removal that were terrible and poorly executed, I was told, well, we're coordinating with the city and county to employ the correct tactics in this because we've never done this before. We don't know what we're supposed to be doing. And it was the request of myself and a few other commissioners, including Commissioner French, to not use police if we are going to tell people that they need to leave, to not use police. That didn't happen in a lot of cases. We attempted, or the staff attempted to bring other people in. We got some folks saying, this isn't in my job description, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to tell people to leave. You have to make the police tell people to leave. So there was some organizational, back and forth there. But in the end, how I felt after seeing some of that was major frustration and despair, in a sense that, well, we just don't have the correct tools in the toolbox to adequately support these people. It's in an untenable situation, and we have the trained peace officers that do not have the skills or experience or background to adequately and humanely work with our most vulnerable neighbors. We also haven't developed the alternative that's going to adequately support those people. That's why I'm a big proponent of having a public safety department in the city of Minneapolis, somebody that has to think more broadly than kind of the epistemology of policing, and think of a different way about how do we know what safety is? What is safety? Well, we can't think about it as good guys and bad guys. We have to think about it as a public health failing. And that's why I'm really hopeful that we get to having a public safety department that is led by somebody who thinks more broadly and is maybe informed a little bit better and is able to develop the tools that we need so that when we do have unhoused folks, we can approach them in a way that's humane and in a way that builds trust and that isn't immediately confrontational and violent. And I think that the park board is maybe onto something, not to, again, bring this up, but to bring up our Community Connections and Violence Prevention team. They have developed those relationships. They did it last year when we permitted encampments and had some successful relationships with some of the permitted encampments. And they've done it again this summer. And it's because they're not coming in there with police. And it's very clear that their role is to develop those relationships, and they've built trust. There's more to be done. There's definitely more investment that needs to be made, but I'm really hopeful from seeing that success that that's a model that'll work.
So with that, was there ever a point last summer where you were just like, you know what, our peace officers are failing at keeping the peace. We are continuing to put the people who live in Minneapolis who have the absolute least in a situation where they're losing the tiny bit of stability and security that they have. Was there a point where you looked at it and said, maybe we just need to back off until we have a better system to deal with this? And if so, like who pushed back on that? And, you know, who said, no, we have to continue to kick people out of encampments?
I
And,
said
you
no
know,
for 2.5 months that summer until we passed the 9-0 resolution doing the permitting system. And who pushed back? A lot of people, more than half the board. Many folks at the city level and at the county level as well, that did not see this going well and didn't think that we should have provided support for those folks in the first place. And you know, the two real points for the park board in the summer, from the board's perspective, are allowing folks to stay in the parks, and that was a 6-2 vote, and then creating the permitting system, and that was the 9-0 vote. And that permitting system only was something that we finally developed and had come forward after getting essentially all the board members saying, well, we need to do something else. We can't just let people stay here. So I would say that those were the 2 points. And then in between, I mean, it's talking to, as many of our staff did, or many of our commissioners did, saying we shouldn't be using police in any of this, but I could never get a vote for telling them to stop. That there wasn't support for that. So it was a very, very challenging and not good time. And I don't think that it was necessarily, I mean, I'm not proud of how those interactions went, and I'm pretty despairing about the entire result there. But I also think that if the park board hadn't done anything or stepped up, we wouldn't have permitted any sites, and we wouldn't have confronted the issue and really shown how to the full public. There were encampments in the wealthiest areas of my district. I think it was a good thing that this was front and center, and still is front and center. I think it's more front and center than it was certainly 3 years ago, when we were just kicking people out of parks with no notice always. That's what was happening, and it was police doing that all the time. And now, this year, based upon all of the failings of last year, police do not kick people out of encampments. It's our community connections and violence prevention team connecting with people. So that's a big shift. I mean, it's not a perfect shift. It's not, a solution, but it's a big change.
Yeah, and
Jason, are you satisfied with these answers?
I'm satisfied with the answer that one individual commissioner can give. I'll say that. I guess, what do you look at then after having seen this? Like, how do you approach the park police and say, I saw this video of you and this is what you're doing. Clearly you feel justified in that, and that you feel this is okay. Like, what do you look at then to say, we're going to stop this from happening? We're going to, clearly our mayor and our chief of Minneapolis police are very resistant to being transparent or to making known what discipline issues there are or training issues there are. How do you, as the head of the park board, approach that?
That's a great thought or question here. I think that a couple things that I'd say. I mean, one is that it gets me back to thinking about whether or not I'd want MPD to be coming into the parks, because what it makes me think is, you're right, I don't want to have to deal with or have any association or authority over what I think is a broken approach to public safety, which is policing. I just think it's not an effective approach to public safety. That said, we have we have these police. We have either our park police again that report to our superintendent and that have have to report to the board, or we have MPD who, I'm absolved. Something happens in our parks and the police do something bad. They drive on the land, harass somebody. There's something terrible that happens at the hands of police. The board can say, well, that's not our issue. And maybe that is the way to go. I guess the tack that I've kind of found is that it would be better to, as long as we have this structure, it would be better to have those folks have to be reporting to our staff. But you bring up a very good point. I mean, it's not the reality of having this police force is partly to maintain the independence of the park board. That's part of the purpose of it.
Here's a quick question. Who can fire the park police chief?
I think that our the general agreement would be it's the superintendent.
So the superintendent is kind of the mayor figure there.
The superintendent is yes, correct. So the superintendent is hired and fired by the board. But outside of that, it's the superintendent who hires and fires his staff. Now, one might make the argument, and I won't say that some commissioners maybe haven't made an argument, that then by proxy, the board should be able to direct the superintendent to, hire or fire X, Y, or Z person. I got to say that I would be very careful and concerned about what that would do to the organization. The board is set up to be a guiding board of 9 commissioners that hires a superintendent and sets policy. If the board was to become an organization that was more closely involved in the operations of everything in the system, I think we'd need to reset the entire thing to be more like a city council or something like that.
Okay. I'm sorry that we've kept you here for 85 minutes.
And I apologize to all of you for keeping you here for 85 minutes. This is just awful, awful, awful.
I have to tell you about the ice and snow at Mueller Park. It's terrible. I am not confident in the park board's ability to clear ice and snow from the sidewalks. It's not working, Jono.
Our
it's not working.
Brushers aren't working that pollute that leave all those little blue brushes and bristles all winter.
Yeah, I know someone who makes art out of those. They find them and they make art from them, but it's not working. It makes me not confident that the city could do municipal clearing. The park board has tried that in microcosm, and it's not working. And I'm skeptical of socialism in general. So
I'll take that back to our assistant superintendent. I mean, we have all these we've invested in those things to brush off the snow also at our ice rinks. And they are more efficient in that you can do it more quickly. But one, on the sidewalks, it doesn't really work. It just creates an ice sheen. And then 2, it's leaving these bristles everywhere. And on the lake, it's really not, it's not good. It's not good.
Yeah, so are you going to take care of that? Are you going to fix it? What can we do?
I brought it up with with our senior staff. They said that they were going to talk to the manufacturer first about how they were going to improve that.
I don't care. I don't care about the bristles. I just want safe sidewalks, Jono.
Well, then maybe we're going to have to invest in thermo heating under each one of our sidewalks so that we never have to shovel them.
Okay, right here I ask if Jono's dog is named after a former Vikings quarterback.
Yeah, it's a mashup. He's named after a former Vikings quarterback and after a really dark poet. His name is Dante Alighieri Culpepper.
Okay, he didn't misspell the name because it's a mashup. It's Dante, not Dante. It's a very interesting thing for all of you to learn.
Yeah, Dante Culpepper, one of the not great, but really, really had high hopes for him back in the day.
Okay, here we talk about football. I should just cut this out.
Well, he broke his leg, I mean, he had some health issues, so what are you gonna do? But I think maybe his only real claim to fame is that he had Randy Moss on his team. I don't think he would have been as good without him.
It's true. Yeah. Jason, do you have any closing questions?
Well, first, I'd like to note that was a good bit of divine comedy from you there, John. And then I would also like to just tie it back to the beginning of our discussion here. Talking about a park board meeting coming to fisticuffs. If there were some sort of park board battle royal, where would the smart money be, Jono?
I like where this is going. I would say probably Latricia. She heckled me at the open streets. So my money is on Latricia. She burns with the fire. I can see the fire inside of her.
She does.
So,
I would also highlight Commissioner French's deep knowledge and history of WWE and just wrestling in general. So I might be in his camp.
You know where I would put my money?
Where?
Go.
I would put my money on Meg Forney because she fights dirty.
Brad Bourne is the one you got to watch out for, I think, because I've seen him derail a park board meeting before they even set the agenda. It takes him 30 minutes to even approve the agenda. That's some jujitsu right there.
Yeah, he's a master.
Like Latricia versus Brad Bourne, that's a death match right there. That's what I want to see.
Haven't you seen it? Did you not watch the December meeting of 2018?
It's every meeting. Yeah, I think I've seen that. It was so bad that I clipped some clips from it, and I'm like, this is just going to upset people. I can't even put this out. That's how bad it was. It's too hot for Wedge Live. It's going to depress everyone.
Yeah, I'm going to have residual PTSD from the last 4 years for a while. I haven't processed any of this, so I don't know. I'm going to do it.
So, Jason, we can tell you don't watch enough park boards saying Meg Forney. Meg Forney's the weakest character on the park board.
I am telling you, she fights dirty. She will find every underhanded trick in the book to come out on top.
You're not going to be president next time, right?
That is correct. I will not.
Okay.
I do not.
Okay, Jono, we've come to the end. Thank you for sticking around for almost 90 minutes. I bet you're exhausted.
I am so just excited. I'm going to be buzzing for a long time. But thank you, John. Thank you very much, Jason. It was great to talk.
Oh.
I appreciate it.
Wait, we're not done. We're not done.
Oh, okay.
Okay, this is where I ask Jono to give us things that are making him happy. And this episode's not going to make anyone happy. I apologize. But let's hear what Jono has to recommend to everyone else.
3 things that make me happy. 1, I like to play basketball at Stevens Square Park, hang out with a lot of kids there and neighbors. That's great. Always brings me some joy. A second thing, something I've been watching. I don't really watch a lot of television, but my girlfriend did get me into watching The White Lotus, which I have enjoyed. And then third thing that gives me some joy. I go to the dog parks with Dante, and I enjoy that. Especially the Narnia of dog parks. If you haven't been, it's quite incredible. Even if you don't have a dog, that is the Minnehaha dog park. It just goes on forever.
Okay, I want to apologize to my co-host, to our guest, Jono Cowgill, president of the park board. He's running for re-election. He's going to be on your ballot. Hopefully I don't screw up the sound again. This was awful.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Jono.
But I am your host, John Edwards. This has been the Wedge Life Podcast.
This is a real thing. Real thing.
None of you have the balls to stop this. Stop this.
I've got plenty of time. nothing else going on today?
We're in the Wedge neighborhood right now, 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 right now.